The morning Loretta Denton arrived at the Grand Meridian Hotel in downtown Atlanta, she wore the pale blue dress she had kept folded in tissue paper at the back of her closet for 2 years, waiting for an occasion worthy of it. She had pressed it the night before, with the same iron she had owned since 1994, running it slowly across each fold the way her mother had taught her, because some things deserved the kind of care that showed. She was 67 years old, her silver-streaked hair pulled back into a neat chignon, her purse, a practical tan leather bag worn soft at the corners, tucked under one arm. In her other hand, she carried a small gift bag with pale ribbon handles. Inside it, a framed photograph she had been meaning to give her daughter for months. The two of them at Imara's college graduation, standing in front of a rented car they had driven 18 hours round trip, because Loretta could not afford the flight. She had driven the return leg herself, at night, on 3 hours of sleep, while her daughter dozed in the passenger seat. She had never once mentioned that part to anyone. Loretta had taken the early bus from her hotel 2 blocks over, a modest place she had booked herself, insisting, when Imara offered to cover a room at the Grand Meridian, that she was perfectly comfortable, and that spending $800 a night on a hotel room was the kind of waste she would not be able to sleep through regardless of the thread count. She had arrived in Atlanta the evening before, eaten dinner alone at a diner near the bus station, and gone to bed early so she could be fresh and presentable by the time the lobby doors opened at 8. She had not told Imara she was coming. That was the surprise. The Atlanta Tech Summit had been announced 6 months earlier, and when Loretta read the press release, her neighbor Gwen had forwarded to her, the one that named her daughter as the keynote speaker. She had printed it out and taped it to the refrigerator next to a drawing her late sister's granddaughter had made in kindergarten. She had shown it to everyone who walked through her door for 2 weeks. Her pastor, the pharmacist at the corner drugstore, a man who came to fix her garbage disposal and had the misfortune of complimenting her refrigerator. Loretta Denton was not a woman who bragged, but she was, without question, a woman who had earned the right to. She had raised Imara alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati's West Side, working as a school principal by day and tutoring at the community center 3 evenings a week. After Imara's father left when Imara was 4, Loretta had not allowed herself a single year of self-pity. She had simply recalculated what was available and begun again, quietly and without ceremony. She had taught Imara to read with library books and flashcards. She made herself from index cards and a set of colored markers. She had sat at the kitchen table with her daughter every school night until the homework was done, even on evenings when she herself had been awake since 5 in the morning. She had scripted and saved and said no to so many small pleasures that the word no had become a kind of prayer, a discipline she offered up daily in exchange for the future she intended her daughter to have. She did not know, walking across the broad marble floors of the Grand Meridian lobby that Thursday morning, that the future had already arrived with considerably more velocity than either of them had ever quite allowed themselves to imagine. Imara Denton was 41 years old, the founder and CEO of Lattice Systems, a software infrastructure company she had built from a laptop in a shared apartment to a firm currently valued at just over $3 billion. She had appeared on 4 magazine covers in the past 2 years, turned down a Senate advisory appointment because it conflicted with a product launch, and 3 weeks prior had quietly closed a landmark investment that gave her fund a 30% stake in Meridian Hospitality Group, the parent company of the very hotel where her mother was now walking, unrecognized, across the lobby floor. Imara was upstairs at that moment, in a suite on the 42nd floor, reviewing her keynote remarks with her chief of staff. She did not yet know her mother had come. The Grand Meridian lobby at 8:15 on a Thursday morning was busy in the way that upscale hotel lobbies are always busy, purposefully, performatively, with a specific kind of hustle that existed to communicate importance. Men in tailored suits crossed the floor, pulling carry-on bags. Women in conference lanyards clustered near the coffee station. A bellman in a burgundy jacket moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. The lobby smelled of eucalyptus and warm stone, and the particular ambition that settles into rooms full of people who have somewhere to be and the means to get there. Loretta moved through it all with the unhurried grace of a woman who had long ago made peace with not hurrying. She crossed toward the concierge desk, intending to ask them to ring her daughter's room, and paused for a moment near the flower arrangement at the center of the lobby, a towering construction of white orchids and greenery that was taller than she was, and smiled at it the way she smiled at anything beautiful and slightly excessive. That was when Dale Harmon noticed her. He was 44 years old, the hotel's director of guest experience, a title that sounded warmer than the man himself actually was. He had worked in hospitality for nearly 20 years and had moved up through the ranks at a pace that he privately attributed to his instincts for knowing who belonged in a room and who did not. He stood near the entrance to the dining room, a tablet tucked under one arm, and watched Loretta with the particular expression of a man assembling a case. She was older, dressed neatly enough but not expensively. No conference lanyard, no rolling luggage, no companion who might clarify her purpose. Her purse was the wrong kind, he decided, though he could not have explained the criteria he was using. She lingered near the flowers. She glanced around without the focused forward motion of a woman with a room key or a reservation. He murmured something to Boyd, the head of lobby security, who had appeared at his elbow in the way that attentive subordinates always seemed to. Boyd was 31, new enough to his position to still confuse vigilance with suspicion, and experienced enough with Harmon's particular language to understand that the tilt of the manager's chin in Loretta's direction was itself an instruction. He crossed the lobby before Loretta had even reached the concierge desk. "Excuse me, ma'am," Boyd said, stepping in front of her, with a tone that was technically polite, but carried the weight of someone who had already decided how the conversation would go. "Are you a registered guest?" Loretta looked up at him with the patient composure of a woman who had spent 30 years managing principals, parents, and school board members who underestimated her, and said simply, "I'm here to see my daughter. She's a guest upstairs. I was just on my way to the concierge." "What's your daughter's name?" Boyd asked. "Imara Denton." Something flickered across his face, a half-recognition that did not fully land, and he glanced back toward Harmon, who had now moved to stand several feet closer. Harmon gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, the kind that means, "Don't let her tell you what you should see. Decide what you see." "Ma'am," Boyd said, his voice dropping to a register meant to convey authority rather than earn it. "Without a room key or valid guest identification, I'm going to need to ask you to wait outside while we verify." Loretta's expression did not change. "I understand," she said, "but the concierge desk is right there. Could you not simply call up to the room from where we're standing? I'm going to need you to step toward the exit while we—" "I'm not going to step toward the exit," Loretta said quietly, without a tremor, without an edge, only the absolute stillness of a woman who knows her own ground. "I have done nothing that requires me to stand outside. I am here to see my daughter, and I would appreciate it if you would call her room." Dale Harmon had reached them by now, smoothing the front of his jacket with one hand as he approached, his expression arranged into the particular hospitality professional's version of concern. Warm on the surface, dismissive underneath. "Good morning," he said to Loretta, in the tone of someone who had already excluded her from the conversation. "Is there a problem here?" "I was just explaining to this gentleman that I'm here to see my daughter," Loretta said. "And as I said," Harmon replied, letting his gaze pass briefly to Boyd before returning it to Loretta, in a way that communicated he had already conferred and decided. "Without a reservation or a room key, we aren't able to allow unaccompanied individuals to move freely through the lobby. This is for the safety and comfort of our guests." Loretta looked at him steadily. Around her, the lobby continued its morning business. A couple in resort wear crossed toward the elevator bank, unchallenged. A man in a polo shirt walked past the concierge desk without being stopped. Loretta noticed these things the way she noticed most things, without comment, but without missing them either. "I'd like to use your phone," she said. "To call my daughter's room. That's all I'm asking." "Our concierge can assist once we've addressed this situation," Harmon said. "Then please let me speak to your concierge." "Ma'am." "I would like to speak to your concierge," she repeated, her voice calm and precise as a school bell. "Or I can speak to your manager. Whichever you prefer." Harmon's jaw tightened. He was the manager, and something in the way she said it told him she already suspected as much. He nodded toward Boyd, and Boyd moved slightly to Loretta's left, not touching her yet, but positioning himself in a way meant to steer her toward the exit, the way you might redirect someone who does not yet understand that they are no longer welcome. "I think it would be best if we stepped outside," Harmon said. "I think it would be best," Loretta said. "If someone called room 4215 and told my daughter that her mother is standing in this lobby, being asked to leave without cause." The couple in resort wear had slowed near the fountain. Watching now, a woman at the coffee station had stopped refilling her cup. The bellman in the burgundy jacket had gone very still near the luggage rack, pretending to straighten bags. Boyd reached out and put his hand on Loretta's arm. Not a grab, not quite, but firm enough that she felt it. Firm enough that the small gift bag swung forward in her grip and the handles slipped from her fingers. It fell to the marble with a sharp, small sound, and the tissue paper inside shifted, and the edge of the framed photograph caught against the bag's corner and cracked. Not completely, just at one edge. But Loretta heard it, and her eyes dropped to the bag on the floor, and for just a moment the composure across her face gave way to something older and quieter. Not anger, not fear, something closer to grief. The particular grief of a person who has been through too much to be shocked by this, but is still, after everything, wounded by it. She knelt slowly to pick it up. Boyd did not help her. Harmon did not move. The lobby watched. It was into that stillness that the elevator doors opened across the marble floor. Heels first, a measured, deliberate rhythm that crossed the lobby without slowing, without hesitation, cutting through the ambient noise of the morning with the particular quality of someone who had trained herself never to enter a room without already knowing every exit. Imara Denton was in a charcoal blazer over a silk blouse, her hair natural and close-cropped, a conference lanyard not yet around her neck because she had not yet gone downstairs to registration. Her chief of staff, a young man named Reed who was new enough to the job to still take notes on everything, trailed 3 steps behind her. Imara had come down because her conference contact had texted to say the AV team needed her on the stage 15 minutes early for a sound check. She had not been expecting to see her mother. She had not been expecting to see her mother kneeling on the floor of the lobby, while a man in a blazer stood over her, and another man in a security uniform stood to her left, with his hand still extended where it had just let go of someone's arm. She crossed the remaining distance in 5 seconds. "Mama." Her voice was low and even, the same register she used in boardrooms when she wanted the room to understand that the temperature had changed. She crouched beside Loretta and with both hands helped her gently to her feet, taking the bag from her and settling it against her own arm. She looked at the cracked corner of the frame, through the tissue paper, and said nothing. But the muscle at the corner of her jaw moved once. She rose and turned to face Dale Harmon. He had the expression of a man who had just realized he had been reading a map upside down for the entire journey and was now trying to look as though he had always known. "Mrs. Denton," he said, with a warmth that had not existed 30 seconds earlier. "We weren't aware that this was." "Her name," Imara said, "is Loretta Denton. She is my mother. She was here to see me. She let a beat pass, which she told you." "Of course, She told you her name. She told you my name. She asked to use the phone. She asked to speak to the concierge." Imara's voice had not risen. It had done the opposite, descended into a register that was perfectly conversational and entirely merciless. "How many times did she ask, before your staff put his hand on her arm. Boyd had taken a step backward. Harmon's tablet was now pressed flat against his chest like a shield. Ms. Denton, I assure you this was simply a misunderstanding during a very busy conference morning and the lobby doors slid open behind them. Lawrence Breck was 62, gray at the temples, dressed in the particular effortlessness of a man who spent money on clothes without thinking about it. He was the CEO of Meridian Hospitality Group, and he had arrived that morning for the same conference, specifically to sit in the front row for the keynote of the woman who had recently become the single largest individual investor in his hotel brand. He had met Imara Denton twice in formal settings. He recognized her from across the lobby before his eyes had even fully adjusted to the indoor light. He crossed toward her. He registered her expression. He registered the older woman at her side, with a hand pressed gently against her forearm. He registered Dale Harmon's face, which was doing something complicated, and Boyd's posture, which told its own story entirely. Ms. Denton. He extended his hand. Lawrence Breck, I'm glad we have a moment before the program begins. Mr. Breck, she shook it. This is my mother, Loretta Denton. She came to Atlanta to support me today. Your staff detained her in your lobby. The word detained landed the way it was meant to. Breck's expression shifted. Not to embarrassment exactly, but to the specific alertness of a businessman who can feel a decision point arriving and is calculating very quickly. He turned to look at Harmon, who was now attempting to become architecturally indistinct. Is this accurate? Breck said. There was a miscommunication, Harmon began. The lobby security footage, Imara said, will show exactly what occurred. My chief of staff is already requesting a copy. Behind her, Reed, who had not in fact been asked to do this yet, began typing very quickly on his phone. Breck looked at Harmon for a long moment, then at Boyd, then at the lobby, which had ceased most of its normal business. The couple in resort wear, the woman at the coffee station, the bellman near the luggage rack, who had not moved in several minutes. Mr. Harmon, Breck said, please step away from this area. Harmon blinked. Sir. Now. Harmon stepped away. Boyd followed 2 steps behind, not looking at anything in particular. Breck turned to Loretta with a directness that acknowledged the scene rather than pretending it away. Mrs. Denton, I am sorry for what happened here this morning. That is not acceptable behavior in any hotel, and certainly not in one bearing the Meridian name. I will personally ensure that this matter is handled with the seriousness it deserves. Loretta studied him for a moment. She had the particular ability of someone who had spent 3 decades evaluating people in the first minute. An ability born from necessity rather than cynicism, from the experience of knowing that how a person treats you when they have nothing to gain is the only data point that actually matters. Lawrence Breck was not a villain, she decided. He was a man who had built something and was genuinely alarmed to discover a rot in the foundation he had not seen. Thank you, she said simply, and turned to her daughter. Imara put her arm around her mother's shoulders, and Loretta leaned into her the way she had not leaned into her since Imara was a child, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Around them the lobby gradually resumed its motion, slowly, cautiously, the way water resettles after a stone has been dropped in. You didn't tell me you were coming, Imara said softly. I wanted to surprise you, Loretta said. You surprised everybody, Imara said. Loretta made a small sound that was almost a laugh. They found a quiet corner near the window overlooking Peachtree Street, and Imara sat with her mother while Reed quietly rearranged the morning's schedule around a cushion of time he understood instinctively was not negotiable. Loretta set the gift bag carefully on the low table between them and smoothed the ribbon handles. Imara reached inside and lifted out the photograph, its frame cracked at the bottom right corner. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. The 2 of them in front of the rented car, squinting in Ohio sunlight. Loretta's arm around an 18-year-old Imara, who was somehow already 3 inches taller than her mother, both of them grinning in the way people grin when they have survived something, and do not yet have the distance to understand how remarkable the surviving was. I can get a new frame, Loretta said. No, Imara said. I'm keeping it exactly like this. Dale Harmon's termination was processed before noon. It was not announced publicly, but within the hotel it moved at the speed that consequential information always moves. Quickly and completely, reaching every member of staff before the lunch service had been laid. Boyd was placed on administrative suspension, pending a review that several people, with first-hand knowledge of that morning's events understood, would not conclude in his favor. Lawrence Breck personally authorized a full audit of the hotel's lobby protocols, a process that within the month would result in mandatory retraining across all 16 properties in the Meridian portfolio. What had happened in the Grand Meridian lobby that Thursday morning spread beyond the hotel before the day was over, carried first by the bystanders who had been there, and then by the kind of momentum that finds its own direction once it begins. The conference organizers, aware of it by mid-morning, asked Imara if she wanted to address it in her keynote. She declined, saying she preferred to let her work speak for itself. But at the very end of her prepared remarks, she paused and set aside her notes and looked out at the audience. Hundreds of people in a room named after a category of wealth she had grown up having no access to whatsoever, and said something she had not planned to say. I want to tell you about the first investor who ever believed in me, she said. She had no venture capital background, no MBA, no portfolio of exits. She had a school principal's salary and a belief in me that was so completely without limit that I was occasionally embarrassed by it. She paused. She drove 18 hours in the dark so I could have a graduation morning she could be proud of, and she went home and never mentioned it to anyone. Another pause. She is in this city today. She is the reason I'm standing in this room. The audience was quiet in the particular way that a room full of people goes quiet when something true has been said in their presence. I made it here, Imara said, because someone decided I mattered before the world had any particular reason to agree. That is not a business strategy. That is a human one. And I think we are long overdue to ask ourselves why we build so many systems that seem designed to forget it. She received a standing ovation that she watched for a moment before looking toward the side of the stage where Loretta was standing, her hands folded in front of her, her pale blue dress still neat, her chignon still intact, the cracked frame photograph somewhere in her bag for the flight home. She was watching her daughter the way she had watched her from 1,000 doorways over the years. From the classroom, when Imara was 7 and had just read her first chapter book aloud to the class, from the front row at the high school science fair, from the lobby of a small bank in Cincinnati, when Imara had gone in alone at 26 to ask for a business loan she did not get. Always at the edge of the room, always there. Imara held her gaze from the stage, and something passed between them that did not require language. The silent accounting of two people who had crossed a long distance together and were only now, in the bright light of this particular morning, beginning to understand the full measure of it. Later, when the conference sessions had ended for the day and the hotel lobby had returned to its ordinary evening hum, Imara and Loretta sat together in the restaurant on the hotel's ground floor. A table Breck had arranged himself, near the window, with a view of the street where the city moved in its nightly patterns. They ordered without looking at the prices, which was new for Loretta, who confessed to Imara that she had spent 35 years looking at prices first, and it was a habit she was not sure she would ever fully unlearn. You don't have to, Imara said. I know, Loretta said, but it's strange not to. I spent so long making those calculations that now they just run in the background like a program I can't close. She looked out the window for a moment. Do you still do that? Every day, Imara said. Loretta smiled. Good, she said. That means you remember where you came from. A waiter brought bread to the table and refilled their water glasses and moved away with the discreet efficiency of someone trained never to intrude. Outside, Atlanta moved through its evening, headlights and pedestrians, and the particular restlessness of a city that does not go quiet easily. "The man who apologized to me this morning," Loretta said after a while. "He seemed genuinely surprised by what happened." "He didn't know," Imara said. "No," Loretta agreed. "That's the part that stays with me. The man who put his hand on my arm probably didn't know either, not fully. He just saw a woman who didn't look like she belonged in a room, and he moved before he thought, because someone above him had already communicated the answer without ever saying the words out loud." She turned her water glass slowly in her fingers. "I've seen it my whole life. It is almost worse when it isn't mean, when it's just automatic." Imara looked at her mother across the table and thought, not for the first time, that she had never known a person with more precision in how they understood the world. "The training they're going to do across the properties," Imara said. "It's not nothing." "No," Loretta agreed. "It is not nothing." A pause. "I would like to contribute something to it, actually, if they'll have me." Imara looked up. "What do you mean?" "I spent 30 years teaching teachers how to see their students clearly." Loretta set down her water glass and folded her hands on the table with the composed practicality of a woman describing something she has already planned. "I know what bias training looks like when it's a checkbox, and I know what it looks like when it actually changes something. I'd like to offer whatever is useful." She glanced briefly at the lobby through the restaurant's glass partition, at the marble floor, where her bag had fallen that morning. "I'd rather spend what's left of my good years making something better than spend them making someone pay." Imara studied her mother's profile in the warm restaurant light, the silver in her hair, the careful posture that decades of work had made second nature, the hands that had packed school lunches and graded homework and driven through the night and signed permission slips and held her daughter's face in them during the hard years, firm and warm and absolutely certain that something better was coming, even when the evidence was thin. "You are the most remarkable person I know," Imara said quietly. Loretta turned and looked at her with an expression that was both pleased and dismissive in the particular way of mothers who accept love and deflect praise in the same breath. "I am a retired school principal from Cincinnati," she said. "You are the one who is remarkable." "We can both be true," Imara said. Loretta considered this for a moment. Then she smiled, fully, without reservation, the kind of smile that reached everything, and said, "All right, we can both be true." Outside, the city carried on. The evening traffic thinned along Peachtree Street and the streetlights came up gold against the dark, and the hotel lobby behind them hummed with the quiet business of an ordinary Thursday night. Loretta ordered the salmon. Imara ordered the lamb. They talked about Gwen, about the pharmacist, about the garbage disposal repairman who had been subjected to the press release. They talked about the photograph and what kind of frame to get for it. And Loretta said she thought she had a navy one at home that would work perfectly. And Imara said no, she would have it professionally framed. And Loretta said that was a waste of money. And Imara said that some things were worth the waste. And Loretta laughed and said those words coming out of her daughter's mouth were perhaps the single clearest sign of how far they had traveled together. And Imara laughed too. And they stayed until the restaurant had nearly emptied. Not because there was anything left to resolve, but simply because neither of them was quite ready to let the evening go. Some distances, once crossed, deserve to be stood in for a while before you move on.